Saleki atsa, eni lepa malasaleal, eni estalink. Eni alonink, ni masian el pasaleki. Nish ushai, ni masian el pasaleki. Good day, my name is Melissa Leal. I am an enrolled member of the Ohlone Costanoan Esselen Nation, which is from the greater Monterey Bay region or Monterey County. I live in Sacramento, which is Miwok and Nisenan territory, and I am currently in the Puente office at the Cross Cultural Center at Sierra College, which is in Rockland, California, in Nisenan territory. And so just acknowledging all the lands that I come from and reside on, and then also acknowledging the ancestors of this land, the ancestors of the lands that you are all on, and giving thanks to all of you for being here with me today. Mi masian el pasaleki means my heart feels good, and that's how we say thank you. So I was just told to talk about something maybe that I've been working on or something that I do within Native American Studies. So I received my bachelor's degree in ethnic studies with the concentration in Native American Studies from CSU Sacramento. And then I did my doctorate in Native American Studies at UC Davis. And when I was doing my doctorate at UC Davis, I originally went in with the intention of focusing on fetal alcohol syndrome and its how it affects juvenile delinquency in Indian country. So I quite quickly realized that though that is a very important topic, it is a very depressing topic. And I didn't want to be known for the rest of my life as the fetal alcohol syndrome person. I took a class with Dr. Jack Forbes. It was actually the last class that he ever taught. And in that class, he told me that I needed to focus on something that brought me joy. That as a young Native California Indian woman, that I needed to find joy in the work that I was doing. And so I thought to myself, what has brought me joy in my life? Through all of the traumas, through all of the things that I had experienced up until that point, because I was young. I was like 24 when I started my Ph.D. But I had experienced some deep traumas before then. And so I thought about it, and it was music and dance and poetry and Janet Jackson and hip hop, right? I come from the hip hop generation. I believe, like Lupe Fiasco says, that hip hop saved my life in many cases. And so I changed my focus and I changed it to hip hop and Indigenous communities. I got some flack from people who thought that hip hop should not be studied in Native American studies, but I also had some support and I continued on. And so the presentation I'm going to do for you today is just a presentation that I've created about hip hop and pipelines, activism, cultural traditions through contemporary music. But I would love if you guys just ask me whatever questions you may have, or whatever you think you want to share today as Native American Studies or Indigenous Studies practitioners or academics or scholars or students. This is for you. So I'm just going to lead it with some of my work, and then we can play, right? So this is hip hop and pipelines, learning history, encountering activism, and sharing cultural traditions through contemporary music. So I just told you a little bit about why hip hop, but this is a picture of Ernie Panicoli. And Ernie Panicoli is Cree. He's from Bed-Stuy in New York. And it's really interesting because I grew up with loving like Word Up magazine. And in Word Up magazine, they have lots of pictures of hip hop artists when I was a kid. And so you could take, also have those fold out posters. I may be dating myself right now, but the fold out posters that you have to take the staples out of the center of the magazine and then hang them all over your room, right? So my room was covered in these posters growing up. But it wasn't until I started working on my dissertation and doing research for my dissertation that I realized that the chief photographer of Word Up magazine was this man, a Native man. So the imagery that I was getting as a youth, right, as a young person of hip hop was through a Native American lens, right, literally. And so it was just one of those things that like validated that the work that I was doing was important. And so this is Ernie Panacoli, and he really inspired me to continue to look at hip hop in Indigenous communities. One of the first groups that I looked at was MC Red Cloud and Crystal Lightning. In this photo, MC Red Cloud is Huichol from Hawthorne, California, and I think he's one of the most amazing MCs. And then Crystal Lightning is actually, she was at that time when they met, she was a DJ and an actress, and they ended up meeting throughout and getting together and became a couple like through this time that I'm doing my dissertation, right? So they started out as two people that I looked at, like one DJ and one rapper, and then they ended up like getting together, and now they have a baby and they make all kinds of fun art stuff together. So this is MC Red Cloud and Crystal Lightning, and together they form Lightning Cloud. So I suggest you check out the music video Krylon Teardrops. It's one of my favorites. With music, especially hip hop, a person or a group of people can self-situate themselves, create new identities, and share traditional knowledge. And this is how I like to talk about hip hop within our communities. The intentions of hip hop are to show us where we came from, right? And acknowledging that hip hop, you know, started in, well, it depends on who you ask, but Jamaica, right? Some people say it started in Jamaica, right, with DJ Cole Herc, and then he kind of brought the foundation of it over here to New York, to Boogie Down Bronx, to Bed-Stuy, to Brooklyn, to all of those areas. So that intention is to show us where we're coming from, to remind us of our resilience, right? And then to offer or create space for creativity and a place to respond to the hegemonic discourse. Of course, that was the beginning of hip hop, right? How it was. Now, when we look at hip hop, it's been commodified a little bit and it's changed, but the history of hip hop remains the same. So when I look at hip hop, one of the major groups that we see, especially in our area in California, we have several members from Savage Family, HGS Savage Family, which is Higher Grounds of Struggle. We have a couple of members that live locally that I knew personally. And so a quote from Wawate Benai from the Leech Lake Reservation in Minnesota, he says, "I think what I rap about is conscious hip hop, issues and things about history. And I use that to educate people." And one of the songs that I use as an example of that is a song titled Indigenous Holocaust. And so the song talks about things that have happened to Indigenous communities in, you know, the United States, but it specifically looks at boarding schools and how children were taken to boarding schools and some never returned, and the atrocities that happened at some of those boarding schools. And so that's a nice song too. Thank you, Tammy, to look at as well. I will play a couple of things for you guys, just not these ones yet. I'm on like a new laptop, so forgive me. This is what I called the original instructions. So we have hip hop, which tells the story of people who have faced severe trauma, poverty, marginalization, genocide, slavery, colonization, and have survived it with a sense of dignity and pride, and who are able to express that through music, through dance, through graffiti, and through beat making, right? Or DJing, as we say. So Native hip hop artists use hip hop as a means to reclaim their history, heal themselves and others, and remember the strength of their people through informing society with their asumpa. And asumpa is the word that I use for flow. And it's also the word that I use for rapping. So asumpa in my language means to flow like water. So in hip hop, we say somebody flows, right? Like when they're rapping, it has flow. And so that's the word that I use, and I have continued to use. So how is language connected to this? So one of the key things that I wanted to show and I wanted to explore was how language revitalization can happen within Native communities using hip hop, because I knew it was going on. So Native American hip hop is an essential method in learning and revitalizing Indigenous languages and culture, which reinforce spiritual teachings. The first rap song ever recorded in the Dakota language was produced in a joint effort by the Costanoan College and the Association on American Indian Affairs. And the song was titled Wikojani Mitawa, which means my life. And the story of how that was created, I think, is more important than actually the song. So there was a group of youth who wanted to write a rap song. They came together for a workshop and they wanted to write a rap song, and they wanted to write it about their life, right? What it was like for them to be young Native people. And I think most of them lived on the reservation. And so they wrote it in English and they wanted to translate it into Dakota, but none of them really knew Dakota. So they had to get elders. And so they got a group of elders to come in and help them to translate this song into Dakota. Now, what is happening here, right? What is happening here? So not only are they learning language, but they are bridging a gap between the elders and the youth, right? And for the elders to sit down and to not only translate for them, but to hear the story of what they feel like as young Dakota people, right, was pivot, it was essential. It was needed. It was necessary. So here we take rapping, hip hop. We're doing language revitalization. We're building bridges between youth and elders. We're sharing stories. So all of these things are happening just with this creation of this one little song called Wikosani Mitawa, right? And so that was something that I felt was happening a lot in our communities and nobody was talking about this. So this is Tall Paul, and he is Leech Lake Ojibwe. And he grew up in Minneapolis, Minnesota, but he actually wrote a song about this, about being a young Native dude from the city who was trying to learn his language. And so I believe I have it here. Yes, so I'm going to attempt to play this, and hopefully the technology lets the video show. Let's try it out and see what happens. Might have to. Okay. What do you guys see right now? So I know.
Just the PowerPoint. The first.
Yeah, the PowerPoint presentation.
Okay. Give me 1 second. I have to switch screens. Okay, so I'm gonna stop sharing this and then share the screen. Give me 1 second. So, okay. Hold on. Can you guys hear it at least?
Yes.
I feel the light in the face.
It just went away.
Yeah, I can't hear it anymore now.
Okay, sorry.
I don't know why.
It was working when you were sharing.
Definitely native.
There it is.
Take responsibility for being educated. My people and customs originating from early phases of history. It's deeper than fried bread and contest powwows. Tears shedding the sweat. Large prayers go out to all those I've wronged and who have wronged me. Gotta treat them like family. Get your money, do we do Kawishin? Jimushka with Zion, me Dutch, but me, it is Zion. Me Chishanam, Zagit, Iway, when Gnu Chishanam, Bizendal with Shanam, me Wayne Janugam of Yan. Me Mishomis, we do Kawishanam, Jit, I budget too young, and Nishanam, Bay is your twin. Me Jit big, it came to my Kaya, Nishanam, baby, my dizzy win. Becoming aware of a heartbeat's fragility, so I pray for my creator's will and humility. It seems my prayer's weak, I can't speak, not a linguist. Does he hear my English when I vent? I fear the answer to the question. This is symbolic of anguish I feel regarding language and the obligation of revitalizing something sacred. Failure to carry through is disgracing a nation. My first tongue's in need of a facelift, but deciphering conjugations like trying to find my way through a maze in the matrix. Complex, hard to start without an end aside from being fluent. I gotta push the limit if I'm gonna keep pursuing. So I use it in a way that relates to my life and vocab. Bring some entertainment to it, spit it on a track, and I take it out the class. Can't let what I lack become a self-defeating habit that'll make me wanna quit. Get your money, do we do Kawishin? Jimushka with Zion, me Dutch, but me, it is Zion. Me Chishanam, Zagit, Iway, when Gnu Chishanam, Bizendal with Shanam, me Wayne Janugam of Yan. Me Mishomis, we do Kawishin.
Okay. Okay, so we should be back to the PowerPoint now. Is everybody there with me?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So that's Tall prayers in a song. And what, really stuck out to me, there's like a thing on my screen that won't go away. Sorry. Okay. What really stood out to me is, being a person who's trying to revitalize my language as well. And my language was deemed extinct by anthropologists. And so I have no, there's no recordings of our language or anything like that. And so I was working on the same thing that he's sharing like frustration of, and he's actually learning a language that has speakers, right? Anishinaabe. And so here we have it, and how he says like he needed to relate it to his life as being like the city guy that lives in Minneapolis and trying to relate learning his language to life. Well, what does he do? He's a rapper. So he, flipped it, put it in the rap. But he's also within that rap talking about having to connect with his creator in an effort to do that. So there's this cultural, spiritual, linguistic revitalization happening, and it's being shared through a rap song. So that's Tall Paul, Prayers in a Song. Another rap artist that became very popular several years ago is Frank Won, who's Rosebud Lakota. And he became most popular for his music on oil pipelines, basically, and protecting the, Mother Earth. And so Frank Won, in his song Oil for Blood, he talks about oil for blood, you soil my mother's love, and just the institutions and the governments that have initiated and approved oil pipelines and tar sands to be put not only on indigenous land, right? Not only on tribal land or through tribal land, but just in land in general. And so I'm not going to play it just because takes too much time for me to flip back and forth and play, but if we have time at the end, I'm happy to share. But Oil for Blood by Frank Won, and he has other songs that actually speak about this as well. and then here we could go into a whole conversation about Standing Rock, right? And what happened at Standing Rock and all of the hip hop that came out of Standing Rock, because there were tons of music videos that came up out of the Standing Rock movement. And so that would just be a whole nother lesson that we could go into. Ross Cady is a local from California. So he is Pomo. And he is a member of the group Audio Pharmacy, and Audio Pharmacy is a multicultural group. He's one of their lead singers, and the song that I usually share is called Mama, and you're welcome to check that out. But in the song Mama, it's basically about honoring women and also honoring our Mother Earth. And so we see another connection with wanting to protect the sacred, to protect water. And then this whole Water is Life movement coming out of not only the music, but the actual people putting their lives on the line to stop pipelines, tar sands, telescopes going on mountains, like you name it, we have that message within hip hop based on the activism that's happening within our communities. So Mama by Audio Pharmacy. So when I interviewed Ross Cady, he had some really nice things to say. One of the things that I like about Ross Cady and Audio Pharmacy is not only do they talk about stuff that's important to Indigenous communities and multicultural communities everywhere, but they use some traditional instruments as well, and traditional like vibrations and sounds. And so Ross Cady, being Pomo, one of the instruments that they use is like deer hoof rattles. Right. And so that's what we would use traditionally when we're dancing, but he uses it through Audio Pharmacy's performance and recordings, which for me, when I first saw it, was you just don't see California Indian instruments in mainstream music. You just don't see it. Right. So it was one of those things that just, you're like, whoa, so it was really felt like home. So I asked him about his process of creating music and what happens when he performs. So he says the music does two things, that it informs and it heals. And he hopes that that's what his music does, right? And so when we think about all of these songs by Indigenous artists, if you were to especially when I did this, right? Especially when I did this research, now it's changed a little bit. But when I did this research, 95% of the Indigenous hip hop was music that was educational. It wasn't, talking about your car and your money and your girl or your guy or whatever. It was educational. It was telling stories and teaching us how to be human, right? So he says music does two things, it forms and it heals. And we know, right, as Indigenous people or as other people, that music can heal, right? That's what our music was always for. It was for healing. It was for medicine. So when we go into the roundhouse and we dance and we sing, that's a healing ceremony. And so when he does Audio Pharmacy music, he's not differentiating it 100%. There's part of it that you have to, right? But he understands that it's still that process. And he says the spirit comes in and touches you, doctoring you. So the vibrations of that music, the energy of that music, it touches all of us and reminds us that we are all related, that we are all relatives. And so Audio Pharmacy music, the energy that you feel is the same energy that the person next to me is feeling, those vibrations. Even if you can't hear the music, you can feel the vibrations. And the way that he described this process and performance, I thought was really intuitive. Also talks about how, I asked him, how do songs come to you? How do you write your songs? And he said sometimes he's dreamt them. And we know as California Indian people that a lot of our songs come from dreams. And so that was already a method of song making, songwriting within our community, as well as other communities. It's an indigenous ism, right? I kind of use that word a lot, indigenous isms, like they come from indigenous communities, whether that indigenous community is here in California or that indigenous community is, you know, in Sweden with the Sami people or in Africa, right? There's indigenous isms that we all have in common. Interrelatedness. And so I just like to share this because he talks about us all being relatives, but there's a Haudenosaunee teaching that says we are part of everything that is beneath us, above us, and around us. Our past is our present is our future, and our future is 7 generations past and present. And you've probably heard this before, the 7th generation prophecy. Frank Wong talks about this a lot in his music. And so we are all the 7th generation. But one of my favorite quotes about being interrelated is salmon was presented to me and my family through our religion as our brother. The same with the deer, and our sisters are the roots and berries, and you would treat them as such. Their life to you is just as valuable as another person's would be, and that's Margaret Celestine, who's Yakima. And I like that quote because it teaches us that we're not just related because we all breathe the air and we live in this world, right? That we're related on a deeper level, right? That the salmon sustains us and cares for us just like a family member would, right? And then the fact is that women are the first environment. And I connect that to all of the things that we've talked about today in terms of Ross Cady talking about the environment, and Audio Pharmacy's song about the Mother Earth. When we talk about oil and pipelines, we're talking about women, right? The women who are absorbing the waters and the chemicals from these tar sands and these pipelines, who are the first environment for the babies. We're talking about the earth, who is the mother, right? And all of our environment. So just creating these connections and showing relationship within hip hop and with hip hop artists. And as Jasper, she's from British Columbia, of the Stalo people in Skokale First Nations, and her video, Dancing on the Run, I suggest you check that out. It's really fun. It's less hip hop, more poppy, but she illustrates the resiliency of traditional dance song and other cultural elements. She teaches a historical lesson through this song, where she teaches us about the banning and making illegal traditional ceremonies like potlatches. So where she's from, potlatch is a traditional ceremony, and that was banned for many, many years, meaning people could get arrested, get beat, you know, just horrible things could happen, get fined, to the people who are practicing a potlatch ceremony, which includes like this huge gift giving activity in potlatch. So isn't that wild? Like that it was outlawed for you to like give gifts and to share, you know, culture. It reminds us that our ancestors went to jail and even worse, so that we could continue to pray and to be indigenous. And in the video, right, and the song is called "No Matter What They Say, No Matter What They Do, We're gonna dance forever. No matter you know what happens, we're gonna dance together." And if you just listen to the song, it sounds like she's talking about like a couple that people aren't okay with being in a relationship, but we don't care what they say. We're still gonna be together. We're gonna dance together. We're gonna be a couple. But she's talking about her people, right? Potlatch people who for years had to hide underground and continue these potlatch ceremonies, even knowing that they could go to jail or get in big trouble for doing them, that they're going to do them on the run, they're going to do them underground, and no matter what they say, no matter what the Indian agent tells them, they're going to continue to do them. And what's interesting is that when she filmed the video for this, somebody called the police on them because their drumming was too loud. So I thought that was a real, like, you know, yes, see, even today in the 2000s, people don't want Native people to practice their religion. So there's Dancing on the Run, which I wish I could show you, but you please check it out. And then hip hop is powerful. Not only does it create a voice for the voiceless, right? A place to express oneself, a groove to dance to, but additionally, it's a mode of cultural, historical, and linguistic transmission. This transmission is achieved through a sumpa or through flow, right? And so a sumpa brings energy, promotes healing, and informs the world of the world. And Prolific the rapper did an amazing video at Standing Rock and talked about being a working in the oil refineries or in the oil industry and realizing what he was doing to himself, his family, his community, and to the earth. And he stopped. And when he went to Standing Rock to protest, he made a video and a song about that, that experience for him. MTV made a documentary that included Frank Wong and Inez Jasper, and so it's called Rebel Music Native America, and that's on YouTube as well if you want to check that out. I was one of the producers and advisory board coordinators, researchers for that. So in my language, to say thank you, we say Nimasian al Pasaleki, and I know we have some time, but I did want to stop for a little bit and see if you guys had any thoughts or questions or ideas or anything that you may want to ask or talk about. So I'm just reading some of the comments right now, and what I would say too is that in a lot of our indigenous languages, I know in mine, so in Esselen, the word alpa means to speak and to pray. And so we learn that the words that we say out loud are as powerful as our prayers. And so not only is that a translation, but that's a worldview that we get, right? A worldview that we should be living by, even though it's extremely difficult in this day and age, right? It might have been a lot easier to know that what we say is a prayer back in a time, especially in California on the coast where my people are from, when you had plentiful food and you weren't fighting over anything and there was nobody, you know, it was just nice. But learning our languages can help us to remember who we are and how we should interact with each other. And we find that a lot in music, but in hip hop for me specifically. Thank you everyone for whatever you shared here. Go ahead, Genevieve.
Hi. I just really wanted to say thank you. This is not what I thought we would be talking about, but this I care about a lot. Frank Wong to me is just such a powerful person. And his music has done so much, not just for the youth of his own community, but for a lot of Indigenous youth, and inspired them to really go out and, you know, do what they want to do, which is hard when you grow up on reservations like he did, to find that inspiration, to find that hope of you can go out and do great things and, you know, be an influential person, not just in your community, but for those around you. And I just wanted to note for everybody that actually a lot of these people you can also find on like Spotify, so you can listen to them. You can also find a lot of them on YouTube. There's a lot of great Indigenous people who make YouTube content. Patrick is a Navajo, is one of the biggest current Indigenous youth who's making YouTubes, and he's just a super wonderful person. He shares a lot about his community, and it's just a very uplifting channel. And I just really appreciated you bringing up this topic, because I feel like a lot of times people think of Indigenous people as past people, not current people who are doing very current modern things and are very active in their communities. And I just think that this was such a great topic, and I really appreciated it.
Thank you, Genevieve. Yeah, that's why I decided, okay, well, I'm just going to go with what I like to talk about because, like, I mean, this is current, right? This is what our kids are talking about. Like, you can go on TikTok now and there's like tons and tons of native music makers, right? And they're making what we would call contemporary music, hip hop, rock, whatever it may be. And what I thought, is funny is that when I first did my dissertation and I was working on this, I had a lot of people saying like, this is not Native American studies, this is not important, this is not, this is not. And if you fast forward like a few years, and I was the first one to do it in Native American studies. I was the first one to write my dissertation about hip hop in Native American studies in the country, I believe. I think there was a couple of people in Canada. And I only say that because fast forward, now there's like all these people writing about hip hop, right? In academia through Native American lenses or Indigenous lenses. There's movies and films and all this stuff being made. There's lots of it, like people are getting, Native creators are finally getting attention. And so for all the like, no's, this is not that I had to go through, right? I'm just proud that now it's like, I'm glad they're not having to experience some of that, right? Because I had to experience it for them, which is great. Alan Lechusa Aquayo did write about Without Reservation. I think he did it through American Studies, but he was like the first one that kind of I looked at when I started this project. Yeah. Yes, Donna.
Thank you. I really appreciate your topic and the fact that you brought your culture in with music and dance. And as a multicultural dance instructor for the last 40 years, I can totally resonate with what you're saying. I did have a very spiritual Hasidic rabbi tell me that everyone needs to pray to their maker, however way they choose on a daily basis, that this is very important to show your gratitude for what you have, the gifts you were given. But higher than prayer is music, and wordless prayer, wordless music, which at powwows you hear sometimes it's the drumming, sometimes it's just almost kind of a seance, or not a seance, that's the wrong word, the repetitivity of particular sounds that are not necessarily words, but they are a very spiritual utterance, that is even higher than speaking, because your maker provides the right words in the music,
yeah.
The vocalization, there you go. And higher than all of that, and this is from a very strict type of religious leader, higher than that is dance. It is prayer with every inch of your body. And after he told me that, when I was still a college student trying to decide what I wanted to do in teaching, what was my path, I decided to take multicultural dance and do a lot of not just research, but I've taken groups to India 5 times to study the untouchable Kalbalia Indian tradition. These are nomads, and their music and their instruments are 800 years old. And to look at all of these various cultures and indigenous music, and almost all of it is spiritual, and so much of it is lost. And the fact that you're bringing it back for your culture to a new generation that understands hip hop and can get their culture through this, to me, is so inspiring. So I just want to thank you.
You're welcome. And I don't feel like I'm the one doing it. I'm just helping be the voice of the one doing it. But yes, whether we're powwow dancers or traditional roundhouse dancers or whatever culture that we come from within our indigenous cultures, right? We know that we are supposed to dance as hard and as long as we possibly can. We're not allowed to get tired, right? You just keep going, and that's a part of your prayers. And so that's exactly what you're talking about, Donna. So I appreciate that. Yes. Lots of women, JB, the First Lady, Michelle's written, I'm responding to something, and then I'll get you, Rosa, real quick. Oh, was that your question, Rosa?
No.
Okay, give me 1 second. So Michelle's, JB, the First Lady, Crystal Lightning, I'm actually on the 9th, we're having like a hip hop symposium at Columbia College, and I'm focusing on women because they only invited men to come perform. So my talk is going to be all on women rappers. It's because they didn't invite any women rappers, which I don't think was, on their fault, but I'm going to make sure they get some spotlight on that day. So yeah. Rosa, did you have a question?
Yeah, for me, I currently because I'm taking for child development for teaching. I love to incorporate. I am partially Native American. My grandmother was Navajo, but I am also Hispanic, like Mexican. So I try to incorporate both because I see there's some things that some of them share. Like for me, seeing more of my Aztec culture from my grandpa and seeing parts of my grandmother. I wish there was more like bridging between, like, I know that when I go volunteer, I bring some of my like rancheras, like
Yeah.
all that music. And I see so much of like commonality between them, like in a lot of things. Is there a way to kind of make it more like flow together?
Yeah, I think that there's ways that you can find some more of the contemporary Navajo artists. And if you want to email me, I'm happy to like send you names and links. Like they're not going to all pop off in my head right now, but there are a lot of Navajo artists that you can share the music of, right? You can't share like the Navajo ceremonial music and things like that, but there are contemporary artists that you can share and you can bridge the gap with that. And can I say, Rosa, that you are Navajo? You're not part Navajo. You are Navajo. Okay. Thank you so much for sharing and asking that question. Any other thoughts or questions before we finish? Oh, one of my favorites right now is Dreezus, and he has this song called Circles. So check it out, Dreezus Circles. Trying to think, there's a couple. Oh, Snotty Nose Res Kids. Snotty Nose Res Kids, amazing. Just like fun music, right? And then A Tribe Called Red, which is like a DJ electronic mixture music. Yes. My email, I will put it in the chat, is mleal@Sierra College. Oops. College. Why is it so hard to type and tap or type and talk? It would be really hard to type and tap. I do tap dance too. SierraCollege.edu. Okay, and then Genevieve, I think you'll probably be our final question. Final thought.
Actually, I just wanted to make one real quick note. A Tribe Called Red has been renamed. They're now called the
Hallucination. You're right. Yeah, thank you. So A Tribe Called Red started out as A Tribe Called Red, and now they're called the Hallucination. They made some changes to their membership and their goals and dreams as a group. Okay, well, we have like 2 minutes. But I just encourage all of you that if you do teach Native American studies or any, even just parts of Native American studies to students, no matter how old they are, that you can incorporate some of this really cool kind of stuff and it resonates, but they're also learning history and they can learn language and they can learn all these different things just through something that might be a little bit fun for them to absorb. And so I appreciate you all for being here with me today. Again, in my language, to say thank you, we say my heart feels good. So it's Nimasiana Hilpasaleki. And yeah, I will leave you all with that. So have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. You're welcome.